All right, what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at here today are a couple techniques for handling multi-select or multiple value selections in a couple different SharePoint field types. There are two types of columns in SharePoint lists that allow multiple selections, one being a person column, so you would basically allow the person filling out the form to select multiple people to go into that column. And the other is a choice column where you can allow them to select, so rather than being a single multiple choice selection, they can select multiple values. So just as an example, I have a simple list set up here with a title column, a single person, single select person column, a multi-select person column, single select choice, and multi-select choice. You can see I've got some just sample data in here with single person, multiple people, single selection, and multiple selections. Now the first thing you want to realize, first thing you need to understand when it comes to these multi-select values or multi-select columns in SharePoint lists is that the data, even if there is a single value there, the data will always be referenced or viewed in Power Automate as an array, simply an array of one item. So if you already know how to work with arrays in Power Automate, then you're all set. It's basically just another array of data. Now the person field will be an array of objects because the person column is a complex column with multiple values, including the email, the display name, the claims, and some other stuff. Similarly, the multi-select choice column is a complex column where each selection has two components to it. It has a value, which is the text value that's shown, and an ID number, which is its order in the array of choices in that column. And the numbers start at 0, as you would expect in an array. So just to kind of give you a visual example or visual context here, I have a flow set up which is set to run on a selected item. So I'm going to run it on this first item where I simply have, even though this field and this field allow multiple selections, I've only selected single values there. And I called this demo working with multi-select SharePoint columns. So let's select that. And run that flow. And when I go over and look at that flow, we'll take a look at the run data before I show you what the flow actually looks like. This is the iteration that just ran. And we can see here that I've got the selected item, which is that item that I'm selecting in my list. I'm getting that item. And then just to show you what we're getting back from that, I have some compose actions here. So this is what a single person value is. So this is that object that we're getting back from a person column. So we've got a data type, we've got the claims value, display name, email, picture, department, and job title. So any of that information, all of that information is present as dynamic content for use in your flow. That's great. So this is a single person value or single select person field. If I scroll down and take a look at the value of our multi-select person field, it looks similar. We've got the same data, but you'll notice that we have these square brackets surrounding the curly brackets. So the curly brackets, let me reopen this one here, the curly brackets indicate this is an object. So when you see that curly brace, it means, okay, this is the start of an object. There's the first key value, there's the first property key, and then there's first value, property value, etc. Until you get to the end. And you notice each one is separated by a comma. Now, when you're looking at an array, you'll see that starts and ends with a square bracket. So in this case, I only have one value in here, but I'm still seeing it as an array. So any kind of operations you perform in Power Automate are going to view that data as an array, even though it is an array of a single item. But just to show you an example what it would look like if we run it on an item where we've got two values in there. Just to prove my point, I will run that same flow again. Run that flow, and we'll go over here, take a look at that run data, and we'll see here again for our single person value, we've got single person, an array, or an object. In our multi-person field, there's our opening square bracket, and there's our first curly brace and a closing it just scrolled a little too quick there. You'll see a closing curly brace, a comma, and then a second value or a second object in that data. So again, just reinforcing the point that this is an array of data, even if it's an array of only one item. So that's how Power Automate's going to work with it and look at it. All right. So now how do we actually get, what can we do with this data, or what do we need to do with the data really is the question. And that's going to depend on your particular situation. In a lot of cases, these people will use a multi-person or multi-select person field to list out the approvers for a department or the approvers for a project. So then you want to feed that data feed that list of people into an approval action. You're going to create an approval and assign it to those approvers. And you need to understand, or you need to figure out for yourself how you want that to work. Because there is a different, if you simply say assign it to approver email, it's going to create an apply to each loop, so it'll create a new approval. In other words, if you specify 3 approvers, it's creating 3 separate approval objects, each one assigned to, the first one assigned to the first approver, the second one assigned to the second approver, third one assigned to the third approver. And if you're using the start and wait for an approval, then it's going to wait for all 3 of those to finish before it moves on. Or even if you're not using, if you're just using create an approval, it's creating 3 separate approvals, so you then have to deal with the outcome of all 3 approvals. More often than not, you don't want to do that. You want to send it to, basically stick those emails together so that you can send one approval to all 3 people. So again, reinforcing there's a difference between 3 approvals sent to 3 separate people versus 1 approval sent to 3 people. And I'm going to assume that you want to do the second one there. So that's what we're going to show. Now, there are a couple techniques for dealing with these arrays of data in Power Automate. The first way, which is actually shown on the right hand side here, which is the way I worked with it from day one when I first started using this, because it made sense to me and I honestly didn't know there was a better way, was to use variables. So in this case, I created a variable called var people emails and var multi-choice selections. And then once you create those variables, there is an append to, and these are both string variables, I should point out. And let me actually go into edit mode so it'll make a little more sense. So you'll see this is a string variable, and I'm not giving it any value initially, but then inside of this scope, I want to append to that string variable var people emails. Now here's the problem we run into. Not problem, but potential wrinkle. If I want to append those emails together, number one, I need to know that for the sending an approval function, I need semicolon separated emails. So I need to append these email addresses together with semicolons in between. Okay, not a problem. So I'm going to open up my append to string variable, and this is appending to var people emails. I just put a period in there as a placeholder. But I'm going to go into the value and select, I'm going to search for email, and I want the multi-person email. I'll watch carefully what happens when I select multi-person email. Boom, it puts that inside of it and apply to each, because it's going to this multi-person data. That's what we are looking at up here, is multi-person output, is an array. So it's going to, for each item in that array, even if there's only one item, it's going to append that email, and then I need to make sure that I put in a semicolon. Because again, even if there's one, well, if there's one, you'll get away without the semicolon, but if you've got more than one, you won't. So you're better off just putting it there in case. So this is one way that we can deal with that. And then similarly, if in the multi-select choices, if I wanted to maybe include that in an email or somewhere else, and I'm going to export this to a document or an Excel spreadsheet, and I want to take all of those choices and concatenate them together with, well, instead of a semicolon, we'll use a pipe character, because that's something that it's an unusual enough character that it works well for that scenario. So again, I'm going to, in multi-choice selections, the variable here, I'm going to append. I'll just search for choice, and I want the multi-select choice value. Important to select value because that is the text value that we chose in that selection. And again, we see that it created this apply to each loop. So for each item in that multi-select choice array, it's going to append that, and then we'll stick the pipe character at the end. Now, if there's only one item, this is going to look ugly because there's going to be a pipe sitting there that you might not want. Again, it's a cosmetic thing. It may not, in most cases, it's a cosmetic thing. If you're then parsing that data somewhere else down the road, you might have an issue because of that pipe hanging at the end of your text field or your text data. So that's the variable approach, and it works. It's fine. However, there are some people who say that you shouldn't use variables so much in Power Automate. There's a performance hit when you use variables or use too many variables. And honestly, sometimes I've learned more and more often, if I'm building things that involve loops elsewhere, if there are variables and I'm recycling those variable data or the values of those variables, it can be a problem. So I'm trying myself to move away from using variables so much. So what are the other options? Well, when I discovered this, this is actually I learned from watching a couple videos by John Liu, Flow Ninja, and this kind of opened up a whole new world of possibilities. So there are two, there's a data operation called select. And without going into a lot of detail, select allows you to retrieve a specific value. If you have an array of data, it allows you to, or I should say an array of objects, it allows you to retrieve a specific property from that array. So in this case, I'm giving it the array of that multi-person field. Again, that's the same array we looked at before. And now normally you would set this up with a map where you've got a property name or a key and then a value to go in there. What I prefer doing in this scenario, where I'm sticking together multiple email addresses or something like this, because if you do this, it sets up another array of objects that you then need to parse through again. However, if you want to create a simple array, it's basically an array of values rather than the property value pair, you can switch to text mode here by clicking that button, and then just ask it for the specific value. So I'll just say multi-person email, and that's it. So what this is going to output is an array. It's still going to be an array, but it's going to be an array of just the email property from that person field. Then, if I want to stick that together in a format that I can plug into the assigned to for an approval action, I can use a plain old compose action. Compose is one of my favorite things to use for this kind of scenario because it's simple and it's very lightweight. It doesn't cause problems. But in here, I'm going to use, actually, I think there might actually be a specific join action. in data operations? Oh, there is. So you could use the join action. So you can either use a join or you could use compose and then use a join expression. But actually, I'm going to use the join action. So let me just rename get that and rename things to keep it clean and keep myself straight here, thinking straight. Let me delete that. Now from here, I'm going to, it wants an array, because what join does is it takes the elements of an array and sticks them back together, or sticks them together with some separator. So I'm going to say, give me the output of that select people emails and join them with a semicolon. Okay. And then down here for multi-select, I'm gonna, I'll show you, for this one, I'll show you how it would work using an expression. So rather than using that join action, I'm instead going to use a join expression. So just a plain old compose action, but I'm going to go to the expression tab here and type in join. And then what I need to join is, again, the select of the multi-choice selections, the output of that, I should say. And then I need to basically tell it what value, what string I want to use to join them with. And again, like I did with that apply to each, I'm going to use the pipe character. Okay. All right, so let's save this. And I'm going to jump right to the gun, and we're going to go to our third item here, which has a single person, multi-person with 3 selections, all that good stuff. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to say run this flow on that object, or that item. And when I look at that run data, so it was successful, yay, that's good. Let's first look at, see how it worked with the array option, and it works fine. Again, we can basically see what the output is. There's my first email, there's my second email, there's my third email. Now what I'm not seeing is the final product. What I should have done is thrown a compose or something in here so we could see that the output would be all 3 of those stuck together with semicolons at the end. Same thing here in our append of the, so we've got blue pipe and green pipe and yellow pipe. All right. So, but again, if we were looking at the final product of that, we would have that pipe character at the end, which we might or might not want. Now, if we look at how it worked using the data operations, so here we're getting the inputs is that whole array. The output is just the email addresses. Perfect, that's what I want. And then when I look at the join output, we can see that it's joining that with a pipe colon, and, or I'm sorry, semicolon. So this is giving us a string that's beautiful. We can drop that right into an assign to and approval, and it'll work. Or even sending an email, it'll work because we've got semicolon separated email addresses. Beautiful. And you'll notice there's no extra semicolon hanging at the end here. So if there was no additional value to append, it doesn't put in that trailing semicolon. And same thing down here. We're pulling in the colors blue, yellow, green, and yellow. And then in the body here, oh, I forgot to do that. So what we're getting is this value colon blah, blah, blah. Let me just fix that because I forgot that I had left that in the key value format. So basically, just to clean this up, I'm going to get rid of this, switch to text mode, and just grab the multi-select choice value. Save that. And I'll just do a, and actually since I'm going to run this again anyway, let me add a compose here so we can see what those compose, and we're just going to put in the var people emails. And then I will add another compose down here. And we'll call this compose. We'll bring in the var multi-choice selections, and I'll rename this to var Alright, so let's save this, and I'm just going to test it again with the same that recently run trigger. Alright, so there we go. So now just so that we can see what the outcome of that was, there is our people emails, and we've got that extra semicolon hanging at the end. Again, in your it depends whether that's a problem. Really depends on your particular situation and what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. But in many cases, you don't want that extra character hanging out there, especially for something if you want to append the values here, because if you're maybe pushing this out to an Excel spreadsheet, someone might say, well, it looks like there should be a fourth value there, but there's nothing because that separator is there. So by comparison, if we look at the way it works using the select and join, we're getting just the values, and the only separators that are thrown in are between the values, so there's nothing hanging out on the end there. So this went much longer than I expected it to, but hopefully this is helpful and valuable to you if you find yourself having to deal with multi-select person fields or multi-select choice fields. Again, ultimately you need to determine what format you want the data to come out in. But I know personally, most of my projects where I'm bringing in sort of a list of approvers or a list of choices, I want to join them in a way that I can assign something to them, or send an email to them, or I want to output that data in a nice clean, specifically delimited format so that it can be parsed by some other system or displayed somewhere or shown in a spreadsheet or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to say that if I have my choice, I use the select action and a join, or compose with a join expression. But there are certainly other cases where you might be better off using a variable. So those are your options. Hopefully that helps you make a decision and get the job done. Thank you, and have a great day.